Hello ladies, this is Mrs. Newton. Today I'm going to talk to you guys about how you can get started with Bootstrap in your webpage projects. So we've talked a little bit about how Bootstrap is and it enables us to have responsive user interfaces, but I want to talk a little bit more about what Bootstrap actually is. So Bootstrap is a framework. What that means is that it's essentially a library of CSS and JavaScript code that we can include in our projects that give us features and components that have already been written. So the Bootstrap framework has been created by Twitter, and what they did is they wrote all of the CSS and all of this JavaScript code, and they said, hey, this is the foundation of a really good responsive website. We're going to publish this and make it available to anyone who wants to use it. And so if we use the Bootstrap framework in our projects, that's going to offer us already written and ready to use CSS classes to help style our code. It enables us to use responsive styles supporting up to 4 screen sizes. And it also allows us to, it gives us access to some state-of-the-art JavaScript components that make our web pages more interactive and a little bit more animated. And so, with all of that being said, when you're ready to include Bootstrap in your project, there are a few steps that we have to do that. Bootstrap is made up essentially of CSS and JavaScript files, and so we have to create a link to the Bootstrap CSS code. We have to create a link to the Bootstrap JavaScript code, and then we're also going to have to create a link in our HTML to another library called jQuery, because Bootstrap's JavaScript is dependent on jQuery code, and so we'll have to include that as well. Once we've done all of those things, I'm going to show you at the end of this tutorial and in future tutorials how we can apply all of the new Bootstrap components and the Bootstrap styles using divs and classes in our HTML code. Alrighty, and so to get started, I'm going to be doing a lot of examples with a file called demo.html. And so I encourage you to pause the video for just a second and go and download demo.html from Blackboard. You'll need to download the zip file, and also you'll want to unzip that and save demo on your computer. So take a second to do that. And when you're ready, I'm going to show you how this is done. So whenever we open up demo.html in brackets, we're going to see that a lot of it, before we add Bootstrap, looks very similar to what we've had in our other HTML files. We have meta charset equals UTF-8. We do have a new metadata tag. This is going to tell the screen to pay attention to how big the size of the device is. So it's going to say, hey, however big the screen is that's viewing this web page, we need to pay attention to that. And so it's going to make it a little more responsive. We're going to create links to the Bootstrap CSS files in the head section, just like we've been doing in our HTML files up until this point. Inside of my body, I have some H1, H2s, some paragraphs, etc. And then finally down here, inside the body, we're also going to include our JavaScript links. And so you're going to, whenever I show you where to get those, we're going to copy and paste them into this script section at the bottom of the body. So once you have this file and we're ready to go, we are actually going to go ahead and jump to Bootstrap's website. And Bootstrap's website is called getbootstrap.com. I also have a link to this on Blackboard if you want to go look at that. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be clicking on this Getting Started link right here. And in here, we have a couple of options. If you want, you could download all of Bootstrap's code, and you could save it on your computer, and you could put it inside of your web page project. And so just like we have, our custom CSS styles saved within our My World Web Page project, we could also have Bootstrap CSS files saved in our CSS folder in our project as well. However, there are so many people that use Bootstrap that it's actually possible for us to just create a link online to the code. There are some people at a company called Max CDN, and basically they said, hey, we know that a lot of people need this code in their files, so instead of everyone having to download the CSS files, and instead of everyone having to create links, include the CSS files in their projects, we're just going to save the CSS files on our servers on our computers, and you can create a link to our website and to our file. And so we have their website. This is a file path. And just like we have a CSS folder, they have a CSS folder, and inside of that folder is a file called bootstrap.min.css. And so we are essentially linking to the same CSS file that we would have on our computer, except it's saved on someone else's server. And so this first guy, this first link, the latest compiled and minified CSS, we are going to copy this link, and we're going to paste it at the top of our HTML file inside the head section right here. So here we go. I'm going to put this guy in. There we go. And that's it. If we go back to the website, there is another link that you can use. This is for an optional theme. I'm going to show you guys a lot more themes later on, so you can skip that for now. But we will need this JavaScript file, or this JavaScript link. You'll notice that this is not a link tag. This is a script tag. And so when you see script, that means that this is going to include a JavaScript file. And this at the end, you can see that this file is a .js or a .javascript file. So we're going to copy and paste this script tag. Oops. Let's take this, Control C. Now the script needs to go at the bottom of the HTML. So at the bottom of this file, you're going to paste your script. We put the script at the bottom because we don't want the JavaScript running until the HTML has all loaded in the project. So we have our script in here. And now, like I mentioned a second ago, we also need to link to the jQuery library in order to use Bootstrap's JavaScript. And so I'm going to open that window back up, and we can find this. I'm going to create a link for you on Blackboard if you just want to get it off of Blackboard. But if you ever want to do this in the future, or you want to follow along with me now, we can look up Google hosted libraries. And just like there's a company that hosted the Bootstrap's JavaScript and CSS files, or there's a company that saved those, Google also does the same thing with lots of other libraries. And so if you click on hosted libraries, which is the first thing that comes up, there's a list of all of these libraries over here on the right that you can create a link to on Google servers. And so we want to go to jQuery, boop, boop, boop. And all you're going to do is grab this. We'll probably want this one. So just grab this guy right here, number 2, copy it. We're going to paste it. Now really quick, be careful. We need to include the jQuery before we include the Bootstrap, because since Bootstrap is dependent on jQuery, we want to make sure jQuery is in here first. So you paste it, and now we have included all of the things that we need. I probably should have shown you what this looked like before we added the Bootstrap, but that's okay. What we're going to be doing is running this file, and it looks like this. You'll notice that the fonts are not the default Times New Roman fonts, but we have this nice sans serif font. And right now, this is not very responsive because as I grow and shrink the window, the text is kind of fluid. It just moves to fill up as much space as it can, which is not what we're going to see when we get the Bootstrap functionality. But this is, we can see that we are at least including the Bootstrap CSS because the font has changed. So that has been done correctly. All right, so now we've included Bootstrap. I'm going to take just a second to show you how we can receive some of that responsive functionality, and it's pretty easy. I'm going to go back to this guy. There are I'm going to take you through 2 very quick basic Bootstrap classes that are going to be the foundation of all of our Bootstrap web pages. The first thing that we're going to use is something called a container. Bootstrap operates under the idea that we need to put all of the content of our web page inside of a container or inside of a wrapper. And what this is going to do is it's going to provide margins on the sides of our content, and it's also going to give us that responsive functionality that we're looking for. And so with Bootstrap, all of the CSS that they've written, we are going to be able to utilize by applying classes to HTML code in our HTML files. For the most part, and for, I would say, 90% of all of the places we apply the Bootstrap code, we're going to be applying this to div tags. Just to remind you, a div tag is a tag that we can use to surround content and group content together. And so what the container does is it's going to group together all of the content on the entire page, and we're going to give it a class of container. Okay, and so here's an example of what that code is going to look like. We're going to put a div class equals container. Oops, sorry. Okay, so let's go ahead and go and put that into our code. So if we go and look at Bootstrap, or at our code again, we want to put everything, all of this content, from the H1 all the way down through the paragraphs, into a div with a class of container. You don't need to include the scripts in the container, and you need to make sure that the container goes inside of the body, because if you remember, literally all of the content on the page must be inside of the body tags. So above the H1, I'm going to make a div, and I'm going to give it a class of container. Okay, and then I want to make sure to move that closing div tag to the bottom of that last paragraph, right above my scripts. Okay, right there. If you are picky like me, you might want to highlight everything inside of the div and go ahead and push tab, and that way it helps to keep that consistent indentation up, so that we know that, okay, everything at this indentation level is inside of this div. You don't have to do that, but I think that makes your code easier to read and cleaner. And so now that we have this div class equals container, let's look and see what it actually looks like, right? So I'm going to refresh the page, and now, boom, you can notice that there's a little bit of margin now on the left and the right side. And so it has a very sharp line down here and also a sharp line right here. And that in and of itself doesn't seem like much, but watch now what happens as our screen size changes. I'm going to make it look like this. And we can see now, look, okay, so right now the text goes all the way over to here. There's just a little bit of margin. It's a very long paragraph. And this is actually this is the style that's going to be used for a large screen size. As I shrink the screen size, when it gets to be too small for this text, right there, it's snapped to a smaller screen size. So watch, this is large, and then it snaps to medium, right there. Okay, and then it stays medium for a while. And so you notice the text isn't like changing every single pixel that I reduce the screen size. It's staying the same until the screen gets too small for this text, and then boom, it snaps to small, medium, small. And then once we get to an extra small screen size, a small screen size is probably something you'd see on a tablet, and an extra small screen size like this is going to be what you're going to see on a phone. And so once you get to extra small, everything is going to kind of be fluid like we saw before, where the paragraphs just fill up as much space as they can fit. But this works smaller and smaller and smaller. No matter how thin your screen is, we're still going to have the nice formatting. Okay, and so now, since we added that container, we have the magic responsive user interface going on, which is super duper duper nice, all the way to extra large. Okay, one last thing I want to show you guys is one more class called the Jumbotron. And what the Jumbotron is it essentially adds a heading to your page. It provides this nice container for the title of your website. You don't have to use a Jumbotron, but you can if you want to. So the Jumbotron, just like all the other content, is going to go inside of the container. We're going to make a div with a class equals Jumbotron, and generally speaking, you're only going to have maybe a heading and a paragraph inside of this. You're not going to have too much content in this because it's the main title of the page. And so I'm going to show you guys how to go ahead and add that in real quick. We're going to put this H1 and P, welcome to Bootstrap and follow along, ... into a div called Jumbotron. Okay. So above the H1, but make sure you're inside the container. We want to add a div class equals Jumbotron. Okay. And then we want to put the closing div after that paragraph. Don't know why I indented like that. And again, if you want to indent those two, you can. so that we can tell, okay, this H1 and this P are inside of the div. So just by adding that class equals Jumbotron, let's see what change happens now. I'm going to refresh, 1, 2, 3. And look, now there's this really special styling that's been applied to the H1 and the paragraph. They're both a little bit bigger, they have this nice gray background, and they're definitely differentiated from the rest of the content. So the last thing I'm going to do, I'm going to shrink this down to extra small and back to show you what happens. We have large, medium, we have small, and then finally extra small. And you can see those different styles change as the screen sizes change. Even the font size changes from extra small to small, because that makes sense. If you're on a tablet, that font size would be fine, but if you're on a phone, you don't want the font size to be that big. So adding these classes is already giving us some really nice responsive functionality, and moving forward, I'm going to show you even more how we can make our web pages responsive all the way across, not just with the heading, but even with our content. And so thank you for listening. Feel free to watch again if needed, and I hope you enjoyed. Thanks.